Hello, everybody. Greetings. Happy day. We hope that you are well today. Hope that you are trying to maintain your peace and that you are able to create whatever balance you need to continue to function effectively in this chaos that we live in. We want to give, of course, respect and honor to all the people suffering on earth today. When we say that, of course, we talk about the folks in places like Sudan and the Congo, places like the Horn of Africa, Palestine, occupied Palestine, of course, Venezuela, the people of Cuba, of course. And now we add Iran to the list since imperialism has attacked them this weekend. So we want to acknowledge our support for the masses of people across the planet today. And we are intelligent people. We're people who study the world and study it so that we can know how we should participate in that world to make the world a better place. So we don't give in to simplistic narratives. If you talk about supporting the people of Iran, that means you must support Ali Khamenei, the disposed and apparently deceased now leader of Iran, and that's a simplistic analysis. We support all marginalized and oppressed humanity. We don't support ruling class. We don't support any ruling class anywhere on earth. And if you don't understand that, then hold your tongue before you comment on what we're doing because you don't understand it. So we're glad that you're here. Hopefully that can help create some understanding. Important topic today, the immortal legacy of Assata Shakur. We certainly acknowledge that she is an inspiration to all struggling people on the planet Earth. She made her physical transition on September 25th, 2025, in socialist Cuba, Havana, Cuba. And we are, of course, always forever grateful to the Cuban Revolution for everything they've done to support African liberation. And we have always talked about that and will continue to do so. And we will talk today about the importance of Assata Shakur, now an ancestor, the importance of her going forward. And so we're glad that you're joining us to have this discussion. And we give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Of course, we do. They are the rightful caretakers of these lands. And we just simply want to be able to ensure that that is acknowledged and that it's respected what they contribute to the world that we live in and how we can support them in getting their land back. Now, sometimes there's confusion around this. There's a lot of confusion out here. But what we're saying is that, the best thing we can do, in our humble opinion, is to ensure that people are educated about whose land this is. The work that we're doing is crucial in that regard, right? So, there are a lot of Africans around, embarrassed, ashamed about Africa, ignorant about Africa to the core, who want to be anything except African. And so, the best way that we can support the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere is not by uh, saying that yeah we'll be here to help you with your work. We have our own work to do, but that work that we have to do is ensuring that our people get correct education about who we are and respecting the fact that this is indigenous people's land. And on that note, we acknowledge our African ancestors. I mean, it is just so disrespectful for us to talk about an existence we benefit from today living on the earth and not acknowledging how we got to be where we are today. And so when you deny Africa, whether you mean to or not, then that is disrespecting the people who sacrificed for you to be here today, for you to be living and breathing on the planet Earth today. And if you're not African, if you disrespect Africa, you are certainly uh, denying the benefits that you enjoy every day because the wealth of the Western capitalist empire could never exist without the exploitation of Africa. So, at the very least, I used to have a friend Everything you did, he would say Africa. If you sneezed, he instead of saying Gesundheit or God bless you or some of those other things that people say that have no understanding of what they're saying when they say them, he would say Africa, which made sense because basically what he was trying to do was get people to have to acknowledge Africa. And I understood that because the reason why I changed my name went through these people's so-called legal process 42 years ago was for that same reason. I wanted every time you call me, you have to acknowledge Africa. I don't want you to acknowledge France from some colonial slave name that I had. I want you to acknowledge Africa. And this has been one of the best decisions on an individual level that I've ever made. I made a lot of good decisions, but this one is at the top of the list because even today, 42 years later, every time someone meets me, calls me, acknowledges me, they have to acknowledge Africa. Whether they want to or not, whether they're comfortable doing it or not, it doesn't matter. They have to acknowledge Africa. And every day I have people who say, um, well, I just can't say it. And I say, oh, you could say it. I have more confidence in you than that. You know, you can't say a word. Like, that's too much of a struggle for you? Of course you can. And they practice it and they say it. And, you know, there's no problem with you practicing and getting it wrong because, again, the point is you acknowledge Africa just by attempting to say it. Even if you say it wrong, you acknowledge Africa. And in acknowledging Africa, you acknowledge the people who struggle to allow us to exist today. And by doing that, you give strength and honor to the struggle that we're engaged in today that will put us in a better place tomorrow. That's what we're all about. So, welcome here. Glad that you're here. And we'll just start with our usual introduction for those that may not know that we again, this program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. We're not just individuals talking on social media. We are a part of an organization that is worldwide, full of African people who are fighting for African unity centered around our mother, Africa. And the APRP, in doing that, is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan African, all African political party that is based in Africa. We're not based in New York or LA or Miami or Houston or Chicago, although we have people in all those places. We are based in the national home of every person of African descent on the planet Earth. It's the only land that we have any legitimate and moral right to, Africa. That does not mean you have to go there. Many of us are not ready mentally, physically, or spiritually to go to Africa, but it does mean that you have to acknowledge that where Africa goes, that's where we'll go. And that's what we're about here. So our objective in getting to that point is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one united socialist Africa, one united scientifically socialist Africa. This is the objective, which we are convinced will bring about the best solution for solving all of the problems that African people face in 120 countries scattered all over the world, speaking all types of different colonial languages, all types of different national languages that are a part of our cultures, eating all types of foods, practicing all types of faiths. As Africa goes, we go. Whether you're Muslim, Christian, agnostic, atheist, Verdun, Santeria, Buddhist, whatever it is, where Africa goes, that's where we'll go. And our work to achieve Pan Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the cover displayed on this page. And in that book, Nkrumah talked about the necessity to unite all revolutionary Pan African formations on the ground throughout the African continent who agree in the objective of Pan Africanism being one unified socialist Africa. And so we are on the ground all over Africa and everywhere else where African people live, and we are engaging in that work. And as you know, if you've been paying attention or you've been here, um, back in January, a month or so ago, I was at home in Southern Africa doing this work that I'm talking to you about. I've been doing it for the last 42 years. So I understand that it's not a dream, it's not a hope, it's not something I want to see happen. It's something that is happening on the ground. I've done this work all over the African continent. I've done it in Europe. I've done it in Canada, in the Caribbean, and of course, all over this backward cesspool empire. So I know that it's real. I've seen the people, I work with them. I know that we are building strength, and the attacks that are aimed against us are living proof that we are being successful. We're building momentum with the work that we're doing. And our Ancestors' Voices, this particular program, is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological and ideological daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. And so, to get us started on this topic of the wonderful legacy of Sister Assata Shakur, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Baba Jamu. Greetings, everyone. Hello, hello. How are you all? So excited to bring you this seminar topic. We have always been excited to talk about our comrade, Assata Shakur, but I think I'm feeling a little bit closer to her now that I have stepped on the same soil that she made her transition on, but also that she made her home for a good portion of her life. And I just want to start off by saying that I spoke a couple of weeks ago when I gave my first report back, and how we talked about at our ICAP ceremony, we all were all the brigades were responsible for having some type of entertainment method that we needed to display. So some people performed a song, some groups said a poem, other groups did some type of dancing to represent their culture as it related to Cuba. And again, like, we had brigades there that were from Australia, we had brigades there that were obviously from the US, we had brigades there that were from other parts of the world, like Asia, and even some parts that were disclosed later in terms of like New York by way of the Caribbean and whatnot. So I'm saying all of this to say, for our brigade, I think we did like the coolest thing where we wanted to pay homage to our comrade Asada, but we understood that obviously the primary language is Spanish. So the comrades got together, they wrote out her poem, one of her famous poems that she talks about, and they performed it in Spanish. The complete poem was in Spanish. And I just think that it's important for us to just kind of think more about what it means to use our positionality and to use our platform to speak out against injustices. For somebody sitting in the audience, they may have only known that Asada lived in Cuba, but they may not have known to the full extent that she was known for, what her legacy looked like. And I think in us doing that, I can put the name of the poem in the chat, but it escapes my mind right now. But I think in us doing that, not only are we promoting her legacy, we are also helping people to understand just the kind of person that she was, especially because we already know from her earlier life, especially if we read her book, her autobiography, Asada, or even just got more information about her work as a Panther and even her work later in life, we understand that the only thing that she found to be possible was always being a humanist and being principled and living with that no matter what. Even her in her life, like being falsely accused of something that she did not do, a crime that she did not commit, and even what happened because she needed to fight back against that. And so I'm really humbled to be able to say that our brigade was a part of that. I'm thankful that we understood the importance of paying homage to her. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a disagreement. We all agreed hands down that that's what we wanted to do for our brigade. And then I just remember speaking and hearing from our tour guide the first day that we were there. He was talking about the Cuban Revolution, he was talking about the Cuban struggle, and he just casually mentioned, and so, because of all of the things that Cuba has done for different comrades, it was no question when Comrade Asada needed a place for safety, like we had no problem doing that. And he teared up. And so then the rest of us teared up, right? Because it was just really beautiful just to kind of hear him say, somebody who didn't even meet Asada per se, but just to hear him say as a Cuban, like, there was no question. We already knew that this is what we wanted to do. Basically, she was on the right side of history, her story, their story, and we also wanted to be a part of that. We needed her to be safe. We didn't want any harm to come her way, and so it was no question for us to do that. And so just a little, personal anecdote there, but let's continue to talk more about who Asata was. So, our comrade was raised in Willington, Delaware, and the former name that they had before they changed their name was Joanne Chesimard, and ended up in New York City attending community college. I also will just point out quickly, we have Assata, we have Geronimo Pratt, we have Dr. Huey P. Newton, we have Shirley Graham Du Bois. I mean, you all should do the research. There are so many Pan-Africanists who also pursued higher education and then used their education to contribute to the masses of people and to doing the work that the people required. So, so important for us to learn more about who those folks are and how they have contributed to our struggle. So we understand that during her time at the community college, it was there that she joined the Black Panther Party and became a party member. Because of her work and the intense police repression that was against the Panthers, especially in New York City, she was targeted by the FBI counterintelligence program, or what you might know as the COINTELPRO program. This caused her to have to go underground, and she was pulled into an automobile she was pulled over in an automobile on the New Jersey Turnpike on May 2nd, 1973. A shootout did take place, and Zayd Shakur was killed. Assata Shakur was wounded and captured, and Sundiata Acoli temporarily escaped, being captured days later to spend 40 plus years in prison. Assata emerged in socialist Cuba in 1984 and lived out her life peacefully until her recent transition in September of 2025. She was 78 years old. Her 51 years in Cuba consisted of her being an inspiration to the world African liberation movement and all peace and justice loving movements for justice. She maintained her commitment to the new African national liberation movement for her entire life. These pictures that we have on the slide are so beautiful. So we have the three lives in our movement that were impacted on that New Jersey Turnpike on May 2nd, 1973. We have Comrade Assata, we also have Zayd Shakur, and we have our comrade Sundiata Acoli. And it's important to mention, you all, that all of this has taken place because we mentioned earlier the work that she was doing with the Panthers caused her to be put on the COINTELPRO list in the first place. And we want to remind you all, basically, if you are doing work that is going against the capitalist system, doing work that is going against the imperialist system, if you are doing work that is pushing against their ability to exploit you and to dehumanize you, there's a greater chance that you are being watched. There's a greater chance that you are being followed. There's a greater chance that your organization is being more closely monitored. And that's a risk that a lot of us who understand what we do would, like, we're willing to take that, because at the end of the day, we would much rather contribute to the struggle, even if it means a fatal outcome, because we understand that the struggle doesn't stop with us. We understand that you cannot kill the struggle. And so in doing that, we're just trying to contribute what we can to help motivate other people to find their voice and to find their responsibilities when it comes to changing the world and giving back. That's going to look very differently from a lot of us, but for those of us that are on the ground doing the work, we see it every day in different spaces. I did a work study orientation just a couple of weeks ago, and the comrade straight up asked me, do you have any reason to believe that, the FBI or the CIA is watching you? And I said, well, yeah, first of all, our organization is on the state sponsored terrorism list. And second, I can't go anywhere when I'm in a public space without checking the Wi-Fi network and seeing FBI surveillance. So they are very much aware of who I am and what I do. But at the end of the day, does that mean that I have to change who I am? Not necessarily, because when you have such a powerful look at your principles and when you understand that your principles are non-negotiable, you're not willing to lay down for them, you're not willing to submit to them, you're not willing to release how strongly you feel about them, that is the kind of passion that cannot be taken away, even if your life is taken, because even then your spirit still lives on. And the great example I can say to you would, again, bringing it back to Assata, she passed away in September, and there is still so much that we can learn from her. There is still so much that we can continue to practice in her honor and in her legacy. September was not the end of us speaking Assata Shakur's name. I would argue probably, unfortunately, just the beginning, because 9 times out of 10, people are more likely, next slide, please, to be remembered after they pass away than to actually be acknowledged for who they are now. So, with that, I am going to pass it back to Baba Ajamu. But thank you all so much. And let's continue to say her name and learn what she has done.
Asante Sana, Madasi, and Kule. Thank you. And so one error. The last slide said 51 years. Sister Assata was actually in Cuba 41 years, so that was just a typo from 1984 to 2005. And so, who was Assata? We're continuing with that question, you all, and you can find that out very easily and clearly. Assata wrote an autobiography that was released in 1987. And I remember Shakur's mother and I, the day that it dropped in 1987, we were standing outside Marcus Books. They had a San Francisco store then before gentrification forced them to close that location. They still have the store in Oakland. But we were standing outside that store before they opened, waiting to get in so that we could buy this book. And we got this book, and both of us had read it within a week's time. We shared the copy and read it, and it had a tremendous impact on us. So if you haven't read it, you should do that. She graced us with this autobiography, like I said, in 1987. It's a must read. It's a must read. This is so critical to say in 2026 because for some reason, you all, ignorance has become a flex in this society. People are proud to not know a damn thing, and this is the most dangerous weapon that can be used against us because if you don't have information, there's no way you can make the proper decisions. There's no way you can understand which way to go. It's like the old saying: if you don't know where you came from, you will be confused about where you are. And if you're confused about where you are, there's no way in hell you're going to know where you should be going. So there's no flex in being ignorant. You hear this all the time. I don't know nothing about Africa. I don't know nobody in Africa. Someone said that to me last week, and I said, "Well, you're bragging about not knowing a damn thing. Like you shouldn't want to do that. You should be saying, I don't know. I need to find out. Maybe one day I'll read a book. Maybe one day I'll cause myself intense pain by actually studying something. That's a good thing. But in this society, it's become something to be looked down upon because the more ignorant we are, the easier it is to screw us royally. Because if you don't know what's going on, like if you see them bombing Iran and you think, well, they ain't got nothing to do with me, they have you right where they want you. They have you right where they want you because they can do whatever they want. And as long as it's not impacting you individually, you don't care, all the way to the point where it does impact you. But by this time, all the people who could have helped you are gone because you didn't care when they were under attack. So this is their strategy. So it's very important to read, you all. Like people, well, everybody's not going to read. That's the problem. If you can read, there's no reason why you're not reading. Most of these books, including this one, are available free now on PDFs. There's no excuse. There's no excuse other than we're just intellectually lazy. That's the only reason. But read Asada's book, because her ability to take complex political topics and break them down was on par with Malcolm X's, really. His ability to do the same. I mean, she was outstanding at this. For example, her breakdown of the US Civil War, when I read it in her autobiography, it was the most clear, concise, and correct analysis of the Civil War I've ever seen in my entire life. And these people today, they present all of these lies about the Civil War. Well, the Civil War was fought to end slavery, and she destroyed that nonsense in a couple of paragraphs in her autobiography by just explaining that the Northern capitalists wanted to industrialize the South. Absolutely true, because capitalism emerged from seed money from the enslavement of our ancestors. So these people got the fuel to industrialize through our exploitation, and they wanted to further advance that. And the South, in its desire to hang on to the chattel slave system, was standing in the way of that because these Northern capitalists understood that A machine, a cotton gin, could pick cotton much faster and much more efficiently than our ancestors by hand, which meant they could make more money with the industrialization. So they wanted to move the slave system out of the way for that reason. They didn't care about us. Abraham Lincoln himself said that, I mean, money you all read about it, Abraham Lincoln freed us. That cracker didn't free us. He said himself that he only ended slavery because he understood, he was a crafty old cracker, and he understood that nobody had a better incentive to end slavery than the enslaved people. And that's why, y'all will watch the movies Glory. You'll do that and you won't even make the connection that we were the people who had the most uh, incentive to end slavery. So of course we fought better than the Europeans. Of course we fought with more morality and integrity, more determination. Of course we did. I mean, that's just science. But that war was not about freeing us. That was a byproduct. That man wanted to send us all to Africa, and I wish he could. I wish it would have happened, but because that would have meant things would have probably turned out a lot differently in terms of what happened with Africa, uh, where it stands today, and what happened with us, where we stand today. But that was not feasible because of the numbers of us that were here at that time. But that's the history, y'all. We gotta understand that we can't be running around here with all this information all around us and ignorant as hell. That just makes no sense, and it's playing right into the hands of our enemies. And we can't get it by just watching YouTube videos. That's not an education. That's not helping us learn critical thinking. Assata Shakur would be the first person to tell you this, what I'm telling you right now. You're watching a video that your mind is taking in someone else's analysis. When you read, that forces you to develop your own. It forces you to develop your own. That's why it's so important. So if you can read, there's no excuse not to do it. Plain and simple. So Assata's politics in the New York Black Panther Party, they were always rooted in the new African independence movement. And we're not a part of the new African independence movement. We don't believe that we're a new African people. We believe we're the same African people who were colonized 500 years ago. But that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the new African independence movement is one of the movements that has struggled relentlessly and courageously for our people's liberation. So we work with them and we respect them for that, even though we don't agree, because we don't have to agree with you to respect your contribution. We understand that there are a lot of people that make all types of contributions. Someone was complaining to me about the NAACP yesterday. The NAACP, they don't do nothing. And I said, well, what organization are you in? I don't have to be in no organization. I'm like, you have to be in one to have me listen to you. I don't want it because all you are is intellectual masturbation. You want to talk. You don't even believe enough in what you're telling me right now to get with other people to make sure it happens. So why would I want to listen to you? That's a waste of time. I'm not doing that. I don't have to agree with what the NAACP is doing. I respect the fact that at least they're trying, they're coming together, trying to do something. That's more than you're doing. So the new African independence movement, a wonderful movement. If you don't want to join the Pan-African movement, you don't think Africa is primary, then you should join the new African independence movement. And if you don't want to do that, you should join the NAACP. And if you don't want to do that, you should join the I'm better than all them organization. That's what we're about. Because these types of movements, like the new African independence movement, they're dedicated to African people building up our self-determination, which Assata Shakur was all about that. All about that. So let's talk about let's talk about Assata in Cuba. We talked about her going there in 1984, but just some of the backstory of that, in case you didn't know. So again, she was arrested in 1973. She was convicted. She was sent to prison. She was in the Clinton Correctional Facility in New York, and she was there for until 1979. And what happened is there were comrades who were in the Black Liberation Army and other comrades who were not African who had been in organizations like the Weather Underground, for example, and they came together and they had a plan. They had been engaged in activities around gathering resources for the liberation movement. And these activities involved robbing banks. And some of you hear that and you're like, oh, criminals. But we can never be criminals robbing banks to get money for the African Revolution. The banking system in the capitalist system started from seed money provided from the enslavement of our ancestors. You find out for yourself. Don't believe me. Go and Google, just pick a bank. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Duche Bank, Barclays Bank. Just pick any damn bank you want to pick, and they all and Google the bank's name, comma slavery. They all have had to acknowledge that they got their start from seed money provided by the enslavement of our ancestors. So if you understand that, like we do, how the hell are we criminals when somebody goes in the bank to get the money back to use for our people's liberation? How the hell does I'm not a fool? That doesn't make us criminals at all. That makes us liberatory people. We're liberating the resources that were stolen from us in the first place. Only a slave would be happy to have health insurance from Aetna or AIG or New York Life when the entire insurance industry was built and maintained off of the enslavement of our ancestors. And they got us so goddamn confused that we're just happy that we're able to have health insurance and pay them money when their whole existence is the result of robbing, stealing, and killing our people. We shouldn't even have to pay them a nickel. We should have free health insurance, free universal health care. That's what we should, but we don't have sense enough to demand that. I was glad I got insurance. That's a slave mentality if you ever seen one. That's what that is. And if you said that before you came on this program, then that's the slave mentality. It's objective. It's not a personal attack. It is objective. So let's talk about Assata and Cuba because these comrades worked to liberate her on November 2nd, 1979. A number of them have gone on to the ancestors, and we pay respect and tribute to them. Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga, a very disciplined soldier for African liberation, played a leading role in helping Assata escape from prison. Comrade Matulu Shakur, who we lost recently, but was one of the people involved in this effort and did 33 years in prison because of his role in helping Assata escape. My auntie, our European comrade family member, Marilyn Buck, who was a member of Weather Underground and who went to prison 33 years because they convicted her because she had rented the van that was used in a couple of actions that this collection of people engaged in, including actions that they tied to the escape of Assata Shakur, who we lost comrade Marilyn some years ago. But these are wonderful people who played a role in allowing this to happen. And this is how Assata ended up in socialist Cuba. Like Shakur alluded to from her time in Cuba in December, the Cuban Revolution said that we would be honored to have Sister Assata Shakur come here. But that shouldn't surprise you if you know anything about socialist Cuba. You shouldn't be surprised by that at all. Because those of you Africans out here who love to say, well, we don't have any allies, this is another example of how you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because socialist Cuba has always been there for the African struggle for freedom, justice, and liberation. It didn't start with Assata Shakur. It started with the Cuban Revolution in actuality. But we can cite a number of examples where Cuba has shown intense, deliberate, and unselfish solidarity with our people and our fight for liberation. No question about that. In 1960, Fidel Castro led a delegation of Cubans to New York City to the United Nations. They refused to let them in. And they said, well, we're going to camp in Central Park. And they want to embarrass the United States, which they did that. They've been doing that for 6 decades. And Malcolm X was a part of the Free Cuba Committee, and they invited Fidel Castro to come up in his delegation to come up to Harlem. And they came to Harlem, and Malcolm met with Fidel. And the entire Cuban delegation stayed at the Hotel Teresa, one of the first major embarrassments to U.S. capitalism and this capitalist backward empire that the Cuban Revolution fostered onto them. But that was just one of many things they did. You know, four short years after that, after the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency led to the sabotage of the national Congolese movement in the Congo, because the Congo gained its independence in 1960. And that was a disaster for international capitalism because the Congo is the richest mineral region in the world. And at that time, the big thing going on was what they called the Cold War, right? The proliferation of nuclear weapons. What makes nuclear weapons? Uranium. Where is the most plentiful supply of uranium on the planet Earth? The Congo. So all these people were fighting for control of this uranium. And here come this arrogant Patrice Lumumba and the National Congolese Movement. Oh, we want to control the uranium that our country produces to eliminate this mass poverty that Belgium has imposed upon us and all these colonial powers have imposed upon us. And these capitalist powers like the US, well, they couldn't have that, so they assassinated Lumumba. And 4 years after that, the National Congolese Movement forces were fighting against the US backed forces in the Congo. And Che Guevara from Cuba went to the Congo with 100 combatants to fight against the US backed forces. And they didn't win, but Che went to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and regrouped and made contacts in Dar es Salaam, all throughout Africa, with the Cuban Revolution. And I mentioned last week when I went to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, we went to the Cuban embassy, and the Cuban ambassador was so delighted with my knowledge of the Cuban Revolution that he invited me up to where Che Guevara stayed for the 4 months that he was there, living in the embassy, undetected by the Central Intelligence Agency. I saw his bedroom. I saw where he studied. I saw where he had all his meetings with all the liberation movement people all throughout Africa. And this is important, you all, because this led to the development of a Cuban military uh, apparatus that was placed in Africa to assist in African liberation movements, that was led by a man named Victor Drake Cruz, who Shakur had a chance to meet when she went to Cuba in December. I've never had a chance to meet Victor Drake Cruz, but I've known about Victor Drake Cruz since I was a teenager. I've studied his work in Africa. And from that led to Cuba's operations in Southern Africa to stop the spread of racist apartheid, where they sent hundreds of thousands of troops. And I'm saying all this because Cuba not only did that, but they sent doctors to 30 countries in Africa during the COVID pandemic. And Assata wasn't the first African freedom fighter from the U.S. that they welcomed there. Robert Williams, who was the NAACP leader in Monroe, North Carolina in 1957. And those racist crackers there framed him and wanted to bring him on some trumped up charges. So he had to flee the country and he went to Cuba and he was supported there. And then he went on to China. And then there were others. Eldridge Cleaver went there in 1968. Huey P. Newton lived in Cuba for 3 years, escaping charges here. The co-founder and ideologue for the Black Panther Party did that. There were a number of them that you don't even know. Bill Brent, Nehanda Abanin, they all were African freedom fighters from the U.S. who went to Cuba and lived there. Assata was one of the last ones to go. Okay, so this is what you got to understand. Those of you talking about we don't have any allies, because Cuba didn't get a damn thing for all those things because you might say, because I know how a lot of people think, it's impossible because, people are so cynical because you don't do anything for anybody else other than yourself. You think nobody else will do anything for anybody other than themselves. But that's your problem. Cuba got nothing for doing all of that for the African liberation struggle. Show us what they got. Show us what they received. There was no aid. We're not organized enough to have any aid to give them. There was no money. We're not organized enough to have any money to give them. They did what they did, even though they're a poor country, because it was the right thing to do. I know that's just almost impossible for some of us to understand the concept of doing the right thing just because it's the right thing. But that's what they did, because this is a socialist principle. That's why they don't want you to know what socialism is. They don't want you to understand that socialism is based on moral incentive, not material. I only ain't do none of this. I get paid. That's material incentive. Moral incentive is that you do things because they're the right thing to do. And Assata Shakur understood this clearly, and she expressed her graciousness to the Cuban Revolution because the Cuban people are serious. I know you see this news stuff and you listen to these lion ass crackers and graham crackers on TV. So you think when they say the Cuban Revolution is going to have regime change, you believe that. But you got to study this stuff again. You know, they told you they changed the regime in Venezuela. They haven't changed a damn thing in Venezuela. They just kidnapped somebody. They didn't change the system. But if you don't understand the system, you'll believe them. Oh, we kidnapped we. You didn't do a damn thing. They just pimped you for your tax dollars to do it. That's how this system works. So that's why the study is so important. And Asada understood that. She constantly talked about how gracious she was to the Cuban Revolution and her understanding of how socialism implemented is the most humane system on the planet Earth. And I know people in the U. I mean, we've been so heavily propagandized. But I don't care how much you think that you agree with capitalist ideology. My one question for you is: if socialism is such a worthless system, why don't they just leave it alone and let it fail on their own? Why do they constantly sabotage it? Why do they have to have a 60 plus year economic blockade against Cuba to the point where Shakur can tell you when she was there, they don't even have the ability to have access to regular resources like electricity because they stopped the oil. They just uh, sabotaged the oil tanker the other day going to Cuba. They're stopping the Venezuelan uh, folks from sending oil to Cuba, and they're trying to do everything they can to prevent the Cuban people from having oil for heating, for electricity. They prevent them, like Shakur talked about in a report back, you can't even use debit cards there because these corporations that process debit cards, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and all that bullshit, these are capitalist countries that have to abide by the U.S. economic blockade against Cuba. So if socialism is so worthless, why are you working so hard to sabotage it? To make it so that the people cannot even get pharmaceuticals in Cuba. Why do you have to do that? Like if I hated somebody and I'm like, that person is a piece of you know what, and everything they say is a lie, if I go behind that and I do everything to prevent them from having the opportunity to speak, then now I'm the problem, not them. Because if they're everything I said, that I would want to have them talk to as many people as possible so that they can expose how despicable they are. But if I'm doing everything to prevent them from having a voice talking about where everything they say is a lie, then at a bare minimum, I'm as much a problem as they are. Probably much more of a problem, probably the problem. So that's the question you got to ask yourself. If you're like, well, these revolutions no good. Well, why don't they leave them alone? What has Venezuela done to the U.S.? What has Cuba done to the U.S.? Nothing. They have been attempting to sabotage those revolutions since 1959 with Cuba, since 1999 with Venezuela. They continue to do everything they can. In 2011, they destroyed the socialist Libyan Jamahiriya in North Africa. Why do they have to sabotage socialism if it's such a terrible system? Leave it alone and let it fail on its own because they know that it won't fail on its own. That's why. That's why they have to sabotage it. They know that it won't. They prohibit pharmaceuticals from going to Cuba. What did the Cuban Socialist Revolution do? It responded by creating, according to the United Nations, not these African revolutionaries, according to the United Nations, they responded by creating the most advanced biomedical industry on the planet Earth. They don't have pharmaceuticals, they use plants to create medicines. And while they're doing that, you all, they have wiped out mother to child HIV infections. Or I'm sorry, they wiped out mother to child HIV. They've wiped out cervical cancer. They were one of the first countries in the world to create an effective COVID vaccine. It was so effective they were able to take it to, as I mentioned, 30 countries in Africa. You didn't hear about any serious COVID impact in the overwhelming majority of countries in Africa, certainly not the ones where Cuba was able to make a contribution. The only places where you had COVID outbreak were where the colonizers are. Zimbabwe, Zania, where I was in January, what you call South Africa, that's where we had a COVID problem, where the European colonizers are still living there. We didn't have one anywhere else in Africa. That's a fact. So this is what we have to understand. And Assata understood graciousness to the Cuban Revolution. If you don't know about the Cuban Revolution, then at least don't say anything. Say, well, you know what? I really need to study up on the Cuban Revolution. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't be sitting there like a lump of diarrhea. And when someone says, yeah, communism ain't no good, yeah, it ain't no good. And you know damn well you barely know how to spell the word communism, not to mention define it or understand what it looks like. You don't even, we haven't even had communism yet because communism is a society without class, and that's never happened. That's an evolutionary process. I mean, this is just basic information, you all. But there's no education in this society, so it doesn't get talked about except from us. We're going to talk about it. And if you're serious about understanding the forces that impact the world, you won't listen to us, but you'll find out for yourself. That's what we want to do, is just encourage you to find out for yourself. So just some little knowns about Assata, right? So for a number of years, until the late 2000s, Assata worked in Cuba for, Shakur mentioned, the Cuban Institute of Friendship for the Peoples, ICAP. That's an organization that exists to educate people, primarily from this backward country, about the Cuban Revolution. That's why ICAP is there. And Assata's job working for ICAP was to meet visitors who come to Cuba and help them understand the contributions of the Cuban Revolution. So ICAP and Assata working there is the reason why I myself got to meet her in 1994 when I went to Cuba. I got to meet her and hung out with her for 5 days. And actually, I'm not a journalist, I'm a revolutionary. I'm a Pan Africanist revolutionary. But um, I had a camcorder when I was there, and I asked her if I could talk to her on camera, and she said yes, because she knew how and why we were going to use the work. But I'll tell you, there were a number of people there on the delegation I went on. And by the way, if you want to see the video, it's on YouTube. You can go to our page, AAPRPCA for California, and you can see the video. Type in Assata Shakur talks about socialism in Cuba, and it'll come up, and you'll hear me on it talking to her. And I'm not a journalist, so if you're looking for a perfect journalist interview, then don't waste your time. But what that did do in 1994, there was nothing about Assata Shakur. So I posted that video, showed it wherever I was. The internet was barely up in 1994. I showed that video to thousands of people, and it gave them a connection to Assata Shakur. There's a lot out now, but I did that when there was nothing out. So, people like, oh, the video, it's not the quality. It's like, yeah, you can go to hell with that. Because when I came back here, the FBI paid me a visit because they found out about somebody told them, I don't know what happened. But they said, they came to my job. You can go ask the people. I worked I was at a credit union at that time, working at a credit union, schools credit union here in Sacramento, California. You can call them and ask them. And the FBI came there to the job. They know what they're doing. They want to intimidate you. That's why they do that. They came to the job and they said, we're here. They came in, I was in my office, and they came in there and they were like, we need to talk to you. And I just looked at them because I don't negotiate with terrorists, and the police agencies are terrorists. So I don't negotiate with them. So I just looked at them, and the man said, he offered his card, and I just looked at him, and he put the card on my desk, and he said, we're here because you just recently took a trip to Cuba. And I didn't say anything to him. I just looked at him because I don't negotiate with terrorists. And then he said, well, you had video there of someone we're very interested in. And I said, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he said, well, you have video of Joanne Chesimard. That's what he said, because they refuse to call us by our names. And I said, yeah, I don't know who that is. You don't know who Joanna Chesmart is? I said, I don't know anybody by that name, which is not a lie because her name is Assata Shakur. I don't know. I didn't know her when she was Joanna Chesmart. So I don't know. I don't know who that is. I said, I don't know that. He's like, you sure you want to say that? I'm like, look, man, what do you want? Like, do you have a warrant to talk to me? Are you saying you have charges you want to bring against me? Because I don't want to talk to you. You don't want to talk to us? Like, no, I don't talk to people like you. And I got up, I said, so you can leave. And they left because you don't have to talk to them. But most of us don't know that. We think that, we're so trained to listen to these Gestapos and to respect white supremacy that they come to us and we get scared and we take hell with them. I'm scared of disrespecting the legacy of our people's struggle for justice and forward human progress, rather. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm not afraid of these Gestapo police and any of their, if they can go straight to hell. Okay, I told them that. And then they called me into a management meeting and they're like, so what was the FBI here to visit you? And I said, you gotta ask them. I don't know why they came here. Y'all know that I'm active in the community. Like they don't like that. You know, I'm going back to work. And that's what I told them because I don't walk around in fear like that. I'm not living like that. So this is what happened there. But there are a number of people who work for ICAP in Cuba, and they do a wonderful job, of educating people about the Cuban Revolution. Now, one of the people is on the picture on the screen, Fernando Gonzalez Lort. He is the president of ICAP. And Shakur got a chance to see him as well when she was there. Now, I'm talking about him because he is a hero. There was a group called the Cuban Five. Now, again, I mentioned the United Snakes of America has been sabotaging the Cuban Revolution since its inception, and they've been sponsoring terrorist attacks against Cuba. The CIA has funded illegal groups like Omega 66 and Alpha 7. These groups that are Alpha 66 and Omega 7. I got it mixed up. These are groups that have engaged in terrorist acts against Cuba, including shooting down an airplane in 1977 where 70 plus members of the Cuban national football team were killed when the plane crashed. And these people are uh, funded by the CIA. People like Jorge Posada Corrales, who thank God he died. I mean, burn in hell, goddammit. And these guys, Orlando Bosch, and these people that were behind all of these illegal actions. So, you sit there today and the US, oh, they're against us. Somebody was on Facebook today talking about they killed Muammar Gaddafi because he was a terrorist. I'm like, the U.S. is not in any moral position to call somebody a terrorist. Your tax dollars paid for terrorism against socialist Cuba. So how the hell are they gonna criticize? We can talk about Gaddafi. I'm prepared to. I told him I'm prepared to tell you how confused you are, but that's not even the point. The point they can't in no position to call nobody no terrorist. That's a damn lie. They're the biggest, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet Earth is the United States of America. That's unquestionably true. But Fernando Gonzalez Lort was one of the people who went undercover in Miami to try to spy on these thugs and criminals to try to get information about all this sabotage they were doing against the Cuban people. And as a result, he was arrested and he spent 16 years in prison here. This man on your screen here. His wife didn't even know because they had to make it believable. So he turned up in Miami talking about, I escaped the Cuban Revolution. It was, they're dictators. They're all the propaganda you already know because they filled your head with it for your entire life. And his wife denounced him. She's an official in the Cuban Communist Party. She denounced him. She didn't know. I mean, that's how dedicated this brother was. So when I met and hung out with Assata, we went to the beach. We went to a festival. We did all kind of stuff. And she was talking about, she said the determination that these people here have to be free, to be principled human beings, to be socialists, makes me realize that everything I thought I knew was nothing until I came here that's what she told me. And I understand that because I feel the same way about the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban revolutionaries. I feel the same way. They are a living inspiration for the planet Earth. And it's only because of them no matter what you think you know or how you feel about socialism, it is only because of them that we can talk about our sister Assata today and be proud and happy that she had 42 years of her life in peace and mental health in socialist Cuba. That was the only place on earth where she could go and be safe because they're not sellouts like so many people. You wouldn't have invited her to your house. You wouldn't have had her come to your house when she was on the run. So you can't say a damn thing about Cuba. I don't care what you think you know. I don't care what random Cuban that left the revolution that told made you a PhD in the socialist Cuban revolution. You can't say anything to refute the fact that without them, you wouldn't even know who Assata Shakur was today. So thank you to our sister Assata. We will continue to uphold her legacy and her contribution to our struggle. Her escaping the capitalist system continues to be an inspiration for all of us that we can defeat them. That's why Obama put a $2 million bounty on her head in 2014 and said, please, if you put it on the table, if you send her back to the U.S., we will talk about lifting the economic embargo against you, which would solve all the problems they have. And they still said no because they are people of principle. And a people of principle are not going to do something for convenience or to just improve their particular situation if doing that is the wrong thing to do on the side of justice. And I know I lost a lot of you with that because you don't even understand, you have no concept of that. But that's the kind of people they are, and that's the kind of people we want to model ourselves after because that's the kind of people that are going to take this world in the direction that it definitely needs to go. So we've talked about this $2 million bounty, and because of that, Assata has this endearing legacy. Her picture is still up in the post office. You can still see it. They're so lazy they haven't even taken them down yet. But we want to thank you for joining us. We ask you to go to the red and white QR code in the upper left, and in that you can find all of these programs that we sponsor in the AAPRP. You can go to the Forward Ever shop and you can buy hoodies and T-shirts that reflect positive slogans about our people's struggle for liberation, and you can contribute to our ability to do our work. And if you're in the Sacramento area, we have community self-defense, and this week is going to be great because Shakura is going to give our political education is going to be her talking about her trip to Cuba. So we're going to uh, live stream her in, and then we're going to practice our weekly self-defense training. 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese way, Unit 15 here in Sacramento, California. Thursday from 6 to 8. You don't have to people come in there. Where do I sign? We don't have no sign-ups. Just come and be ready. That's all. 6 to 8, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. If you're not here, tell somebody that's here. Join the APRP. Go to aprp-intl.org. Find out more how to join us in this fight. Next week, we want you here. Same time, same platform. We're going to be talking about the incredible contribution of Carlotta Lacumi. Carlotta Lacumi. She was an African woman from Nigeria, kidnapped in slavery, and sent to work on the sugar plantation in Cuba. Shakura went there and saw where Carlotta was. And so Shakura is going to be giving a presentation because Carlotta led one of the most successful slave revolts in the Western Hemisphere from that plantation in Cuba. And these types of slave revolts are the reason why slavery came to an end. It had nothing to do with no damn crackers from France or Britain or the US or any of that damn nonsense. Or the Civil War. It came from the 300 slave revolts that we waged all throughout the Western Hemisphere that made maintaining the slave institution untenable. The bottom QR code on the right, bottom right, the black and white one for Burkina Books. This is our AAPRP work on the ground in Burkina Faso and Niger to bring revolutionary literature there to our people. Become a monthly sponsor. Whatever you can do is helpful. there, $5 a month, $10, $100 a month. Do that. And then my book in the upper right hand corner, we ask you to buy it, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The QR code right next to it. It's only $8 paperback. 100% of the proceeds go towards our anti-fascist work, like the self-defense classes that we do every week and many other things that we do. And the good thing is, you can buy the book, or if you already got it, you can start book clubs. Please call your local library, get them to order it. Please call your bookstores. It's only $8, so they can sell it for $10 and still get a profit. And that way we can help spread the word and develop resources for fighting against these fascists, because you know the fascists ain't going away no time soon. They're proliferating. Thank you for joining us. Be strong. Enjoy the rest of your day.